Okay, we get about 1 to 6, almost 1 to 6, about 900 casualties. Cramptons Gap, with ballast units, drove this down to 11,000. And so I start with a small army, and I want to have an attack on both my right and also on the enemy's right flank, go around the enemy. And my idea is to get into these woods, and I expect the enemy on Major General will be very, very aggressive, and I want that. And the enemy attacks, and I should be able to inflict a lot of losses on him. And the enemy is very aggressive. It works out just fine. But I expect the enemy to be more aggressive than this. What I'd like to do is get the enemy units to move into the water, and I'm not giving them enough room right here. But the first exchanges worked out really well. I'm just waiting for the rest of my army to come in, damage the enemy, degrade them, and bring in my reinforcements. That's all I want to do. So I'm going to fall back closer to the artillery and give them a chance to move into the water while the rest of my army maneuvers around the enemy right flank. That's the plan. So notice I have the infantry fall back to the artillery to give them an opportunity to move forward. That's really interesting. I think the enemy is zooming in on my artillery even though it's supposed to be invisible. You can hit fall back with your artillery. I turn off my artillery, and sure enough, the enemy charges right into the water. That's what I want him to do. And then I have my infantry move up and take shots and turn the artillery on and just deliver a lot of devastating fire. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. I'd like to do that about 20 more times. That would be perfect. So the enemy looks like he's going to stop, and if your artillery hits them enough, they'll lower their morale, but I turn my artillery off to get him to attack, and he does. And this is just sweet. So he charges the one guy there, and he crosses the T. He exposes his flank to my infantry and my artillery at close range, and this is just nothing but great. I have my infantry fall back to stay out of melee because I don't need to. I think about charging him at this point. As soon as he takes a hit, he should collapse, and I could charge him. But I really don't need to at this point. So, although it would have been really cool. I'm afraid he'll get some kind of a melee buff because he's in the woods, and we can just keep hitting this guy with infantry fire. I'm watching him reload. Come on, fire before he gets across the water. Yeah, and there we go. Look at those numbers drop. That is just a thing of beauty. Okay, so while this is going on, the rest of my army is getting into place exactly how I want it to. Everything's going perfectly according to plan. He charges, no surprise, I expect him to. Let my skirmishers, snipers, detached skirmishers all take shots on him while my infantry gets into position, and I intend to hit him with a hammer blow on his far right flank and collapse the whole line. That's a lot of units right there. And if I can get my sniper around behind all this and take shots on his infantry, his generals, his artillery, all that would be good. I send one of my infantry units that wasn't doing very much also to reinforce the left flank, which is a good idea. I start my supply wagon off, but he has one of his skirmishers run down and take a shot on my supply wagon. That turns out to work really well. He has one skirmisher in the water, just getting torn up, and the other one is going to get wiped out. He's going to advance after the supply wagon, and for once I'm using it as... The enemy will use supply wagons as bait and try to get you to attack, but in this case, I accidentally used it as bait. His unit routes, and he gets chased into the corner and annihilated. And that's a really big skirmisher sniper unit and he gets wiped out. So that works out great. He has 2 officers and 2 artillery units, and now my infantry and snipers are getting shots on both his officers and his artillery, so that's working out great. And his flank has been turned. So it's now time. I'm going to start sending a detached skirmisher around behind the enemy line, and I'm also going to take one of my infantry units and have them get behind the enemy left flank. He's drawing up a line in the wood line facing toward my attacking units, and that creates an exposed flank, and I'm going to send a unit to hit that. So any place he moves, he's going to expose a flank, and I'm going to hit it. So there's an artillery unit that's worn down. Come on, take a shot on the artillery, and it's gone. Dead. Nice. My units now have the high ground, and this is just going well. So I still need to get my supply wagon to my left flank, because those guys are going to run out of ammo if I don't. Keep the supply wagon moving. And my sniper took a hit, so that hurt a little bit, but need to get him out of there. This infantry unit advancing, see how there's a unit retreating? My infantry unit's chasing after him. This is one of the bugs in the game. Your units will commit suicide. So the unit he was firing at retreated, so my infantry unit, as soon as the line of sight was blocked, he sprinted ahead. Now it turned out to work out, because I turned to take a shot on the general, but the general moved, and then I saw it was right next to an artillery unit, and I got a shot off before the artillery unit did. In fact, I got 2 shots off, and now the artillery unit is wiped out. So that worked out really well, but that could have been a disaster. I didn't see him. I mean, it takes less than a second, and he raced from his good position of cover and concealment and raced out into the open, where he could have been really taken a lot of losses. But as it turned out, he wiped out an artillery unit, and it worked out fine. So when the enemy falls back, I have my units on the other side of the river come up, and I hit the flank and rear of that again. So his flank completely collapsed. Everybody's getting shots on units that are just routing. Pulling up the artillery, want them to get within canister range and start unloading. My detached skirmisher in the rear of the enemy is doing great work. My infantry coming up from the south is going to be right on the flank of these enemy units. And this whole thing is just, I mean, all these units are just going to flash white very soon if this battle goes on. But unfortunately, the battle ends, which is too bad, because he's just in a position to be wiped out. And yeah, look, we're right on his flank. So anyway, about 900 casualties, killed about over 5,000. It's a good day. Worked out well. It's going to cost nothing to replace my losses, and I'll see you in camp.